All right. Looks like we've split in half. That's good. All the speakers will feel good. All right. As a reminder, we are recording each of the sessions, right? So if you miss one of the others, we'll have that later. We'll publish it so everyone can see it. This next speaker is something really exciting. I'm actually excited to hear it myself, and if I don't catch it all, I'll be watching the recording. Because this next speaker has a lot of insight into ratings firms, analyst firms, and how to, I call it gamify. I don't know if he's comfortable with that term, but how do you work with those organizations, and how do you get the most value out of them? Chris O'Neill is a former member of CLASS, which everyone knows the CLASS organization, and he worked with them doing all of their research. He's also a really interesting guy. If you want to understand the industry, you should sit down with him and talk to him. Beyond just what the analyst firms do. He's a really smart guy, and he also loves sushi. So if you want to invite him to sushi, I think he'll take you up on that. So without further ado, Chris O'Neill.
I want to thank John for putting on this event. It's a really neat idea, and it's pretty cool how it came about so quickly. My name is Chris, and yes, I used to work for CLASS. Who here has not heard of CLASS? Anyone here? All right, so you're all familiar with it. Glad I don't see any tomatoes or lettuce or anything you can throw at me. Remember, this is live stream, so cut down on 4-letter words unless it's cool stuff like love and food and things like that. I'm going to have to apologize. My presentation is in PDF form. The company I'm with now, we are most definitely at startup stage, and we're spread across between Europe and the States and 4 different states across the country all through the weekend. So all of us are having to deal with really spotty hotel internet connections. Oops, I think I skipped one here. My company is called Peer 60. I'm over all the operations and finance for it. We help companies gain better insights from the market, whether it be from their own customers or from prospects or different scenarios there. And we do that in a really high volume, cost-effective way. And there are a lot of things you can find out using our solutions to help you reach out to the market. Before that, I was director of reporting at CLASS. I started doing research, and then I helped the company move into a lot of different areas. We were the team that founded imaging research, modalities, oncology, cardiology, and so I was sort of part of that SWAT team to go out and build new research areas for the company. Before that, I came from business management consulting, some boutique firms, did a lot of market research, executive training. So I've got a lot of history on market research techniques, being a market research firm. Lately, I've been on the other side, helping companies work with market research firms or how to get their own research. What we're going to do in this session, we're going to talk about why do market research firms do what they do. And I use market research very generally here. It could be a ratings firm. It could be a firm that helps with PR. And I'm not here to badmouth market research. What I'm here to do is help put it in its place. Here's what it's good for. Here are the complaints that people have, and here are ways you can work with these companies. And we're going to talk a lot of this is going to come from the experience that I have, and I'm going to talk to you about the things I've seen from the other side of the table that does work. Now, a word about what I've seen. I'm not a disgruntled employee. I had a great time at CLASS. I learned a lot, and I left very amicably. And there are a lot of rumors out there. Do they mess with the ratings? Do scores just change on a whim? And I can honestly say, every day that I worked there, never once did someone go in and fiddle with a score that a hospital gave us. Never once did I hear it talked about. Never once was it thought about that I know of. Never once did I ever hear about scores being changed or people reinterpreting it a different way. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, however, I'm not here to say that the model's perfect. The market research that comes out is perfect. And these are the things that we're going to talk about. Now, first few things I want to do is talk about some stories that you don't get to see published. When you work in the areas that I've worked, you hear some crazy things and you think there's no way that can be true, but we hear them over and over and over again. So we're going to talk about snakes, goons, and possibly homicide. Yes, this really happened. And I went back and talked to the individuals who actually did these calls. A hospital was refurbishing a CT. They didn't want to pay for a brand new one, so they brought in the vendor who brought in a whole bunch of boxes full of parts to refurbish their equipment. That night, the janitor was going through cleaning the room, heard a noise, some hissing sounds, and a couple of snakes were rolling out of this box. Poor janitor. And so I always wondered, what did they think about that? Could that have been a readmission due to hospital-acquired infection? I believe this is the correct ICD-10 code. I could be mistaken. And Google is amazing for ICD-10, so everyone looking for a solution might just as well just use Google. And actually, it was not that much of a negative customer review, but they were very surprised that, hey, snakes came in our CT parts. The Goon Squad. This one really surprised me. This was an imaging center in the South, and they had publicly back to their vendor, talked about some of the complaints they had, saying, hey, we don't know if we're going to renew this contract with you. We've got some grave issues with you. One day they get a knock at the door, at the CEO's door to this imaging center. Two huge individuals with accents sitting in suits told him in no basic terms that you will renew this contract, threatening again and again and again. And I don't know exactly what the interpretation of the story is, but that's, from his point of view, is what happened. The Goon Squad came to his place and said, you will renew this contract. Too crazy to believe? I don't know. But you wouldn't believe the number of stories, the ratings, the information. We just chunked it threw away because we didn't know how usable it was. We threw away so much information. This next one was one that I did. This was the chief of radiology on the West Coast. And he's talking about his PACS vendor. This is, for those of you who don't know what PACS is, this is the information system used to move images around the hospital. These were some of the quotes he gave to me. I hate this vendor. I hate these people. I want to take a shotgun, go to their headquarters, and kill them all. And by this time, I'm thinking, who do I notify? What do I need to do? Do I call the FBI? I mean, seriously, what's the protocol?
Can you say their names?
I'm not going to say their names. I won't do that. Because they might come after me. Who knows? I'm just kidding. And then the last one surprised me most of all. I want to kill their mothers for having them. He was having a bad day. Chief of radiology, right? Very educated, supposedly very, even-keeled, but no. I want to kill their mothers for having them. Yeah, people still ask me about that story if I'm talking to this individual later, but no. Now, why is this topic important? You all have to deal with it. For better or worse, you all have to deal with it. And it doesn't make your jobs any easier. And it's not just because market research is out there, it's because of the day and age we live in. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, every single individual on the earth is a possible influencer these days. So even a little bit of message gets out there, a little bit of negative spin, and your day is ruined. You have to spend a lot of time and money dedicated to this. Huge money. I've seen huge teams. I've sat in with many vendors at their boardrooms, and I've got 14 vice presidents of whatever across from me. And I realize that this is very important. Your initiatives are on the line, things that get derailed by some negative spin, and sometimes your own careers are on the line, depending on what happens, and sometimes it's not totally under your control. Where it became very personal for me, I was pretty early on in my days at class, and I'll say the vendor this time, Siemens had flown a team of us out, 2 or 3 of us out, to spend a week out there in Germany with them, and we met with division after division after division. Some were good meetings, some were not so good meetings, depending on the reviews that they were getting. But I remember right after we arrived, and I'm very junior, I'm nobody knows me, and I don't think very highly of myself, especially at that time. But I remember we were headed to another meeting. I get introduced to a new individual who had just joined from some telecom company to be part of their strategic marketing team. And he knows my name. He walks up, says my name, introduces himself. And we still talk to this day. He's a huge fan of The Sopranos. He says to me, I know your face. I'm like, oh, how do you mean you know my face? Well, as soon as I joined the team, I was assigned to you. I'm like, what do you mean assigned to me? I'm supposed to follow everything you do and say. And again, I know I'm nobody. It's only because I'm in that position. That's when it became very personal to me about how important this information is that we generate, those of us who worked in market research. A couple of weeks ago, before this conference, with John Lynn, we sent out some survey questions to you guys. You may have received that email. There were about 65 people that were registered at the time. And these are some of the answers that you gave us. I wanted the crowd to be able to see what the crowd thinks. So one of the questions we asked is, hey, which research firms do you use if you use any? And again, 65 people, and most questions are around 40 to 50 some odd people answered. So pretty high percentage of those we went after. Most of you said none. And I'm wondering, is that because some of you are the market research firms or the PR firms? But most of the people who work in health IT, selling a product to hospitals or clinics, most of you said Class, Gartner, etc. Not surprising. A high percentage of you said Porter Research. We should have included that. But this is who the crowd here uses for market research. Maybe you find yourself in there, or maybe not. Now let's talk about what these firms really are. These firms are businesses just like you. They provide a service and they expect to get paid for their service or their product. Now, that means that you are their funders. Depending on the model, you are their funders. Therefore, as a buyer, you would expect to have some influence. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how can you leverage that influence. Now, the thing about market research, though, is in order for them to sell it to you, they've got to prove some sort of value to you. And I want you to think about that for a second. And I should have brought this up earlier. If you have a question, we don't have to wait to the very end. I'd rather keep this pretty interactive. So raise your hand at any time during this presentation. Ask me any question that you have. Now, how do they prove value to you? There are two primary models on how they prove that value to you. The first one I call the insight model. It's the one here on the left. I'm using MR for market research. That's what the acronym is for. They produce market research. You find the research directly valuable. You pay money. The one that we're going to talk about is the one on the right. I call it the leverage model. You're not the direct customer, so to speak. Or I should say the customer of the market research is not necessarily the person who's paying you. They generate market research, put it out into the industry, and that spin, however it's bounced around, gets pushed on you. You feel the pressure from the industry, and therefore you feel, I've got to engage, I've got to see what's going on, I need access, I need to talk to these people, I need to pay them some money. So this is the model we're going to key on today. And I believe in a large part, a lot of your complaints come from regarding firms that use this model. The next question we asked were, what are your top frustrations in working with market research firms?
Could you go back to that slide one second?
Yeah.
So, in what ways should it concern the audience? So you said that the one that concerns you, is it concerns meaning that it's applicable to us? Or
Yes.
it should really worry us?
Well, it's both. Really, it concerns us because this is the one we're going to key on for this session.
Okay.
But it should also concern you in that you have to realize when companies say this is their model, therefore what they're also saying is, though you pay us a lot of money, your influence is somewhat less. Your opinions can be less valuable to us because you're not the one we're really serving. You're not who we're really generating the information for. So keep that in mind as far as your mindset when you go into work with them. Even though you might utilize the information and you're probably paying them the most amount of money, if they say, well, our information is public, we generate these public reports, it's for the target audience, whether it be the hospitals, the clinics, or whoever, and you're not really the target audience, then that for them creates sort of a shield, right? They can say, well, it's not for you. This is what they want from us. This is not what you want from us. Your top frustrations, and I asked you to rank them, okay? I gave you like 5 or 6, and I asked you to rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your top frustrations. And these are the percentage of #1 rankings. And far and away cost was the highest. Could someone give me a little bit more detail around that? Is it just the gross amount you have to pay? Is it the bang for buck that you're getting back? Could someone elaborate a little bit more, if you don't mind speaking up publicly about it?
One of the things that I've found in the past is that because of that other model, where as a vendor you're put in a situation where you think that you have to pay to influence the results. That is why the lopsided opinion that it's too much, because it was not planned and budgeted for. Anything that is unplanned is always too high.
That's a good point. It wasn't part of your budget. You didn't plan it in at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Any other comments?
I'll secure an analyst briefing for one of my clients and staff the briefing, and then they say, we love the input, we included it in this report, that will cost X thousands of dollars. And for some of our startups, for instance, those clientele can't afford that at that point in time. So I think they get a little bit of sticker shock.
Absolutely. It's not cheap. This information is not cheap. And part of it, though, is because of the antiquated models that companies use to go after the information. I mean, either they have some very high-priced expert guys who are truly experts in what they do. They're not cheap, or they've got the stable of call centers, right? The cube farm, and maintaining that labor force is not cheap either. They have to cover that cost. Any other comments around high cost?
Not around high cost, but there's one competitive issue that isn't on that chart that definitely is causing us pause right now, and that is the market research company that we went with, one of the biggest names in the industry. We found out a year ago or two that they have a different division that was actually competing with us in the field directly.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? That's a problem that this one.
Huge.
Yeah, and it's something we're having trouble getting over. This is one of the biggest names in business. They have not been able to convince us that we don't have anything to worry about.
Right. No, that you would think at the very least it's blurring symmetrical lines, if not outright crossing over, right? Wow. This stuff is expensive, and part of it is because how do you connect this to value? Why do we talk about high cost instead of high value? Usually in a products industry, you correlate cost to value. You think, I got to pay more, but I'm getting what I pay for it, so I hire a quality car, whatever it is. However, at a certain point in our minds, especially something that can be as intangible as information, as a rating, as a report even, that relationship starts to go inverse in our minds. So we start thinking, how in the world can this actually be that valuable to me? This costs way too much for what I get. And high cost often pulls in a lot of other things under it. It sort of overshadows that it's not necessarily just high cost we're talking about. It could be that I just don't think that for the money I'm paying, they're giving me enough information, or the quality is not that good, or it's not actionable, because all they give me is a generic rating, and I don't know who's having a problem with me. I can't improve the experience for our customers. I can't make this actionable. Maybe the interpretation is questionable in your minds. So even though high cost is far and away the biggest slice of the pie, oftentimes there's a whole lot of other factors that get pulled along with it.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes here, especially with the high cost, is that a lot of customers don't know what it is that they're trying to do with this research.
Exactly
They
right.
call it market research in the sense that they're trying to get a better understanding of the market, but that, arguably that's what Google is for.
Exactly.
The market research here really should be because you're making a decision, and whether that's actionable because you're making a decision, or there's something you're deciding to do at some point because of this input.
Right.
Then I think people find that value is probably there. But if they're not making a decision, I talk customers out of it. I'm like,
Right.
why do you need this market research unless you're making a decision?
Yeah, you're actually getting a little ahead of me. There's a certain point in this presentation, not very far from here, we're going to talk about that. Why are you even engaging? You have to know why you're there. Why are you sitting at the table? You have to know the real reasons. I mean, get pretty honest with yourself, but then also think about what should be the strategy. Where should your end goal be? Was there a comment over here? Okay. So that's the question for you right now then. So which is it for you? Why is the cost high in your opinion? What are you truly getting out of it? Take a moment to think about that. Why do you say the cost is high?
I can say from a vendor or consulting firm being in those reports and having that leverage model, that's the question that you're constantly asking yourself of what is the value to it, but you almost have to pay to play. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more for me, please?
Well, one, they're reviewing your customers. So you've got to know what they're saying about you. And unless you're paying the fees, you can't get the reports to know what's being said about you, as well as your competitors. But you also, they try to do this as objectively as possible, but the question is, how much subjectivity is there to it? So you almost feel obligated to have some kind of subscription to it, just to try and get a fair shake.
It's a plain nice example.
Yeah.
Well, they ask you your client, so how objective is that? I mean, you're feeding them what they want. And we found that we feed them, you know, our good, happy clients, of course. And we find that they don't follow up with them.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a closed loop issue there. It's in the media, it's pay to play, right? It's just disguised
Right.
as legitimacy and credibility. If you're not there, you'll get penalized by it.
Right, and
You
you're
gotta pay to
thinking,
be there.
damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Exactly.
I can't get no satisfaction, right?
Well, when you discuss the objectivity, we just heard from a market research for one of our clients, I own a PR firm, so we're doing the application for them, and in the email, to entice us to do it, they also offered us a consultation fee to talk about what their competitors are doing. And instantly, the CEO of the company questions the credibility, the objectivity, and says, why am I doing this? This is a racket. And from where we're standing, it's very hard to persuade them to pay to play anymore, because it does appear to be
Right.
a racket.
These models can get murky. I mean, it can seem like outright corporate blackmail at times.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're describing. I want to sort of move across the room a couple of things that we heard. You talk about you feel compelled to be there. You have to be there. You feel compelled, have to be at the table. What makes you feel compelled? Why do you feel compelled to be there exactly?
One, because your clients and potential clients are looking at the report.
Right.
And the question is, how much value are they putting in that report? So you have some that put a lot of value there. You have some that's just only part of their search process when they're looking for solutions. So you got to be in the report for those that really value it. If
Right.
you're not in the report, like as you said, you're almost seen as not a contender. So you have to be in that report.
Especially if you're not one of the big, huge names in the industry, right?
Right.
Because they're going to find those sites. They're going to talk to those customers because those customers are everywhere. So you're talking about the guys who, man, I really have to try to influence this to be there. I used to, when I worked at Class, I used to tell a lot of the fellow researchers I worked with that, guys, I don't think the money is coming to us because the data is that valuable. I see it as a retainer fee. They need to maintain access to this, for better or worse. That's what it felt like to me. Because for them, the value wasn't getting the reports when they could sit across from me, across the table from me, asking questions about the information. Where did it come from? Who did you talk to? How many sites did you even talk to? Things like that. There was a comment back here. Who was it that made this? I can't remember. And what was it that you brought up?
Disguise pay to play.
Yeah, pay to play. And again, that is another issue when it comes to model, meaning you're rating the people that pay, right? And for a lot of people, that's almost the number one issue I ran into a lot. And I had problems with that too. And then here, you mentioned some similar things too about, hey, I felt like this was a racket, this corporate blackmail. And I want to touch on this because I want you to remember what you're hearing here, in that you feel you have to be there, you're paying the money, you're funding the model, okay? You're funding the model.
Oh, one other thing, as I was talking to a couple of my clients, is that you're paying no matter what. If you're setting up a company to excel in customer service like Zappos, you're paying there so that your ratings are gonna be taking care of themselves. On the other hand, I had a client who was not putting in enough to raise the level of customer satisfaction, and it's always the unsatisfied who's gonna influence those ratings most. The happy guys are not going there. So then you are paying in the back end to try to influence. So no matter what, companies have to pay either on the front end or the back end.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And the comment you made in the back also about, we try to send in our best clients. That's just assume that every company would do that. I mean, why wouldn't they, right?
So one thing to notice is that we think it's bad in the vendor space. The ZocDocs and others on the physician space are causing a lot of ruckus to independent and practices, because they feel the same exact problem, is that if they don't pay to to play, the guys will remove their ratings off of their sites and it'll look like that they don't exist.
Exactly right.
Which is happening in a
We're
much higher
absolutely
quantity.
stagnant. The last one's in 2004. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
ZocDoc wasn't even around.
Yeah.
Question, are you familiar with these class insight days?
Excuse me?
Class insight days?
Insight Days?
Yeah. where you-
Describe it to me, because I think I am. I don't think they called it that at the time I was there.
So I've just recently taken over the US market, so I'm becoming familiar with the class organization. I'm just looking at my budget, I have $20,000 in my budget for one day with a number of class analysts. And I'm trying to get somebody to convince me why I'm going to spend that on top of the subscription that we pay them already. So apparently we sit in a room with all the analysts that are, related or cover our market. And we can share our strategy, they can tell us what they're hearing in the market about us. Is anybody familiar with these?
Yeah, it's kind of like Partners as well. Partner has something like that. So
Right.
you're able to sit across the table and pick the brains of the experts in that area. So you can try and
Seems
develop
pretty
your strategy.
expensive to fix the price for one day.
That's the same fish test.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Never pushing it hard.
well, the prices are such for a couple of reasons. One, they want you to perceive value out of it. Two, they've got to take all their people off the phones. Even when I was there, we were, I don't know, a few thousand interviews per month were coming in through people making these calls to hospital leadership and clinics. Class Insight Days, we used to do that even when I was there. We didn't call it that, it wasn't formalized, but vendors would come in, they bring in their team, and they, a few hours or a day, pick the brains of people in the room. But it's up to you whether or not you feel you're going to get any extra value out of it over whatever your existing engagement is, or if you feel there's clarification they can give you there that they normally couldn't on the information you're seeing.
Yeah, but there actually is value if you're testing something specific. So where a lot of vendors make the mistake is they go in and they're not quite sure what they're actually testing
Right.
against these. So if you're just thinking about them as a knowledgeable community, then you can say, what would you do to test this?
Well, that's a good point. The other thing I would say, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is you have to go in with your own plan. And I would bring them in on the plan earlier. Here are the things I need to learn. If I can learn these, I'll consider it. I'll consider coming down there. However, if you don't feel like you're getting the right answers around those concerns, I'd second guess it.
The other value to that as well is them getting to know you better and your company better. So as they're doing those assessments and the surveys, they tend to just have a relationship with well, it's a great difference.
Well, they don't tend to invest in us a lot. I mean, I know at Hams, I ran from one analyst meeting to another. There were 30 minutes. What are you going to do in 30 minutes? That's the time they're giving me for free. Sit down with you and tell you our story and get some feedback from you. That doesn't seem like enough. So we got to pay now to spend a whole day with you? Okay. Got it.
Well, another question that we asked, and this is a little biased given the group here, is which departments in your organization actually think the information is useful for strategic decision making? Marketing, not surprising, but we would hear that anecdotally even over, and I still do today, over and over and over again. Even with my current company, where we help you get massive amounts of information very quickly from decision makers, marketing is still one of the main avenues into the company. So, but also think about it in another way. If, depending on the usefulness of the information, wouldn't some of these other departments be using it more? If it truly was that useful. There were some highlights, there were some times where the information truly did help with the decision, but for the most part, these were the nuggets, these were the rare things.
But I guess if you look at this, the assumption is that if marketing truly is driving product development in the future, this actually is okay. The
True.
problem is that in many cases we believe marketing is driving product development,
And
but
they're
it's
not.
absolutely not.
They're not.
So product development should have that data, but that's where I think we make the mistakes, is it's not.
Exactly.
By the time you're just using it for marketing, that data is too late.
Yeah.
Nothing you can do about it anyway.
Now, and the bottom part is really what I want to talk about. Now, it's sort of the chicken and the egg theory. Is it because the market research that's generated is truly not useful to you, or have we learned not to drive it and use it properly? I'd wager there's some of both. This was sort of a, just give me your gut opinion. How useful is third-party market research at all in your decision making? Some 62% of you said somewhat. We find something useful once in a while. You're paying an awful lot of money for once in a while. 27%, extremely useful. You consistently use it in your decision making. Kudos to you. You found a way. Not very, 4%, not at all. So nearly 3/4, nearly 3 out of 4 respondents said either we find something once in a while, hardly at all, or not at all. 3 out of 4 of you who responded basically said it's hard, it's not that useful.
To me, that it was the way the question was worded that I gave my response. It's more about how much are companies willing to spend on market research. When we do it, we use it. But
sometimes you're constrained.
As stated before,
You're constrained, resource constrained by the budget.
this
I can see
doesn't do
that.
a class. I mean,
No, exactly.
We're involved with class, but I like doing primary market research. Usually because there's not any market research out there for our market.
Right.
So primary market research is expensive and it's time consuming.
Very much so.
And so, I have had a difficult time convincing my board that we should spend the money on that. But when I have gotten that, we have used it.
Good.
So, that's how I responded to the question, not
Perfect.
I got market research and then I don't use it.
Right.
That's never really been the case.
I'm sure there are others who feel the same way too. If I had more budget, I think I'd probably get a little bit more, or I'd be able to be more selective in the research I can do. Why do we put so much stock into it? Tell me about your situation then. This could illuminate a couple of things. When you're able to go out and get it, how are you able to use it?
Well, I've done lots of different kinds of studies, so it depends on, once again, you guys were saying, what question do you ask? It's all about the question you're asking. So am I trying to find out if I have an opportunity for a new product or a enhancement to a product? So I've done that kind of research, and that has told us whether we wanted to go forward with trying to build a product and actually put it in the marketplace. Sometimes we have gotten pricing feedback from market research. I've gotten marketing messaging and positioning research back, and we have used that to help us better, craft our message, better decide how we're going to approach the market space.
Good.
So from my perspective, I'm a huge proponent of market research. I know some people have found some ways to do it a little bit less expensively now with online and some things like that, so you don't have to have interviewers or people on the phone or people face to face or whatever, but I wish I could do it more. So for me, it's about doing it more.
So just to add to that, so that's custom research, right?
Yeah.
But the existing research that's out there is questionable.
Yes.
So as an example, we're ranked second in class behind Epic, and they don't deliver the same products and services we do. It's very confusing, so we'll have to be in the same category. So it's not apples to apples, and you have to try to explain that to people who ask you, clients, prospects, whatever, how they categorize things. So there's a lot of work still just to clean up how they compare people.
And I have to say with class, my experience with class seems different than a lot of the people in this room. I've had an actually really good experience with class, but you have to the point I think the gentleman over here made, you have to get class to understand your business. And if they understand your business, they may create a category just for your product, which is what they've done for us. So that way you can say, this is my comparison, rather than being put in a category that somebody else puts you in, and it's like, that's not.
That can work sometimes. Absolutely. Talking about information that's useful, I remember one time we had one of the big modality vendors. They said they used the information that we gathered, specifically the comments, to go and redesign their main CT coil,
Absolutely.
right? Their X-ray tube, because there was a fatal flaw in it. Like, great. That didn't happen a whole lot, but big things like that could happen. Now, as far as having them understand your business, I think that's absolutely true. We're going to talk about engagement, how important that truly is. It's bad that you feel compelled, but engagement is important. And as far as getting them to understand your business, sometimes they could be your proponent on the inside whenever you're not even around. However, it's got to fit in their economic model. We talk about comparisons. Sometimes it's hard for them to do an apples-to-apples comparison, especially because a lot of vendors say, well, there's not anyone who really does what we do. Well, they can't create an economical report around that or a rating because they have to have a lot of vendors to compare it to. So you're not getting apples to apples, you're getting a fruit salad. That's sort of what they try to do in general. And this is not class, this is all ratings firms. It's sort of a fruit salad out there that, yeah, I'm sort of like them, but not really, but they have to group me somehow.
we had the same experience as you did. When we described our business, class felt like we were doing better than anybody else in a category that didn't exist, so they created a new category. And there were enough companies that they could grab participating in that field that they created a category, which was real good for us in that case.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why engagement is important. Real quick, more people said no, they did not feel that their company was fairly represented than said yes, for what it's worth. So what can you do? First of all, stay engaged. You have to be engaged. You gain nothing by disengaging completely, because then you're just sort of left out in the wild. Who knows if you show up in ratings, if you do, what's your customers that they're actually talking to if you're not supplying the list. And here's why you have to be engaged. You want to know what's happening, and you want them to know that you reserve the right to speak to them, to comment to them. You want them to know they can get your phone call. You have to hold them accountable. You have to do that. So you need to maintain those pathways of communication. But pick your level of engagement, only as it benefits your organization. Do you want to buy the big $500,000 golden package? I don't know. That's up to you and your organization. But there's probably ways you can engage at lower levels of investment if it's smarter for you. You hear about the patient's 5 rights. Here are the 5 rights of engaging with a market research firm. First, you have to start with the right mindset. Why are you sitting across the table from them? Is it because you're pissed? Because a negative review came out? What is your end goal for being there? If you feel compelled to be there, fine, but you got to still go in with a plan. Figure out what is it you're trying to do at the end of the day, or by the end of the quarter, or end of the year. What relationships are you trying to influence?
What kind of engagements do analysts take?
Like anyone else, no one likes the negative phone call. They don't want the phone call that says, I think you're wrong. They don't, and sometimes they already know it's coming. They're going to try to avoid it maybe, try to minimize it some, but they're going to have to take your call at some time. Analysts are going to hate the phone call that calls into question the data to begin with and their interpretation of the data on top of that. That's what they're going to hate. And you don't want to go in, and we're going to talk about this, you don't want to go in as a direct assault on them, though, because then it just becomes a fight. And that's not what you're truly trying to do. That doesn't help your organization. The next right has got to be at the right level. Are you talking with the frontline analyst? Who knows what they're truly able to influence? You want the person that they have to report to, the person who feels the financial hit if they have to take your phone call or your company says we're not dealing, right? You have to figure out who that right person is, and that goes back to maybe that could be one of the reasons for going to this analyst day. You have to identify those people in the room and look them in the eye and shake that hand and figure out who that person is.
We have about 5 minutes left, and then we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A at the end.
Okay. At the right time. If you're doing this after your report has come out, you've already lost most of the game. You want to be engaged early and often, because a lot of times, when I was there at class, and I know this is true for a lot of ratings or research firms, we talk to the vendors to try to figure out markets. We talk to them because why? We want to sell some data to you down the road. We want to gauge your interest in what would be something valuable to you, right? So at the end of the year or early in the year, they're figuring out what their roadmap is as far as products they're going to put out. Get engaged, get involved with them, help influence that roadmap. And so that way they seem like, hey, he is a resource to me. I've got a question about this market. I can ping him. Or you feel like, I want to know how they're really thinking about this market, and since you're already engaged, it's not going to be strange for them to get that email from you, asking about that market, how you can help them, what sites do they need, who can you connect them to in your organization to get questions answered. Get engaged early. If you wait for the ratings, you're done. Do it before the ratings come out. That's probably the most important thing I can say. About the right data. Are you really ticked? Are you really questioning the core data that comes out? Or is it what they're saying about it? You have to figure that out. You need to figure out, are you talking about core data or the contextual information? What is it that's sort of gnawing at you at the moment? And with the right money. Meaning, figure out the level of investment that your organization can truly benefit with. I knew a lot of companies that spent tons of money, and even I questioned a little bit, man, I hope we're delivering what they need. And so I know you're questioning the same thing. do not feel like that every additional dollar gives you that much more influence necessarily. Here are bad examples. Do not do the direct assault. Your data sucks, your methodology is just all wrong, even though it could be a black box to you, and your analysis is all wrong. Let me talk to you about examples that I have seen work in an argument. First one, reposition the argument in context of how valid the market research actually is in the market's point of view. You're not saying it's wrong. What you're trying to tell them is, here's how we in the industry look at it, and I'm telling you, if you put out that report, you're going to look like clowns a little bit. I'm trying to help you out. I've seen this work. Not that you're going to get everything you want, but it does move the mark a little bit. Make it about them and not you. It's not about, guys, do you realize how bad this looks for me? They're not going to care. What you need to talk about is, hey, I know we're not perfect and we need to work on some things. We also want this information to be correct so we can act on it. So let's talk about this data. Where did this come from? During that conversation, you can start influencing things then. Don't attack their integrity. You wouldn't like that. Therefore, be professional. Don't attack theirs either. They're not trying to put out bad information. They don't want to put out bad product. Make it about the spin. Say, I know you see things differently from me. Here's why I have a problem with it. And here's the problem with that spin. Statements of transparency. Again, this goes back to the fruit salad. Push for things that will help make your case whenever you've got to take that information in hand to a prospect or a customer, to where you can even point out and say, well, even they say this. So that adds more context and information. So these are things that I've seen from the other side of the table that make sense and do work. And again, you're not going to get everything you're after. You can move the ball some. Little by little, you can move that ball. Other details to consider, and I'm sure you've gone over lots of these with anyone you work with. How much data is represented? When was it collected? Is this really fresh, or is this from 12 months ago? All right, what products are you even comparing here? And version numbers do count. A lot of times they can't get down to the granular level of different version numbers. Are these the same types of customers? Are these really the same market segments? How was the data collected? Let's go over the questions. Try to understand them first, and therefore you can do a better job of influencing later instead of just getting in an argument right away and having their defenses go up. One of the bold ways in which you can do this, and I've seen a few vendors do this, and if you've got budget, sponsor some research, or even sponsor just a question or two that it could be for your eyes only, or maybe you work it out with them and how they package it up. I've seen vendors that do this, and there are two different types of research: a mind share type of report or study, trying to figure out, are we even thought about out there, or when we're thought about, how do people think about us, or more of a perception where you get to seed the ground with your brand saying, hey, we're thinking about doing this, what's your take? So the benefits there are, again, your brand gets out there a little bit more through a third party. You can get some useful info, and again, you're engaging positively with that market research firm. You're engaging with their model, but you get something you can directly influence out of it. But here's some things you need to watch out for. It's got to be true research. I mean, all of us, if we get an email from someone we don't know as a VP of sales at somewhere, we're deleting the email. We can smell that sales pitch a mile away. The market research firm you engage with have to see an ROI. Either they're going to be thought of as thought leaders, or they need to see some money at the end of that rainbow. At the end of the day, though, if you go head to head, and this is something Kent Gale, the founder of Class, always told me. I didn't realize this until I had to go into those boardrooms, sit across from the execs at your organizations, and have answers for them. It's not often that I have to have answers they don't have, because usually these guys are smart guys. They thought through a lot of the same questions. My answers had to be better. So I had to do a lot of research into the questions that they had. Same with you. When you sit across from Class, if you just say your information is bad, why do you say that? Do you have your own information you can counter? So you need to have your own version of the truth that you can control. Do you have your own information that you can show and say, this is our true customer narrative? This is the ultimate trump card. And it is amazing to me how few organizations do this well. Few. It is scarce. I hear organizations all the time talking about our annual survey and we get 8% response rate. That's pathetic. There is no way to run your business and drive evidence-based change. in whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're going after your own version of the truth, if you're not talking at least a quarter, if not more than half of your organization, and if you're not able to get that information in days instead of weeks and months, and know exactly how the comparisons are going, then your information is not as good as it should be. It's not benefiting your organization like it should. And I'm not here to make one of these shameless plugs for my company, but that's why I jumped out and started the company that I'm with today. Because I knew that companies need better information. No matter who you use, no matter the method you use, if you can get this information and this better truth, that's the ultimate trump card. Because then you can play that out there in the market to combat any negative spin. You got to get your own data you can control, to refute false arguments, and to share the customer narrative. If not, you're always going to be at the mercy of these third-party reviewers, and you're going to be over and over again saying the same thing sitting at these chairs. What questions do you have?
So how much of the, how much does it work when you go to an analyst and then need to walk up the chain? I mean, does that actually work where the analyst doesn't like something but his boss may have to redo it?
Yes.
Or boss's boss?
It does work. Because often, you know what a gatekeeper's role is. It's usually to say no. And you've got to get beyond that. You need to get to the person up the chain who can actually say, yeah, we should change this, or they've got the authority to say yes. It does work.
I have a question. How responsive are analysts actually going to be if I want to come to you and say, I think you're incorrect, I have the numbers and the customer narrative to show. I mean, numbers speak for themselves, but
Right. I'm obviously going to give you a happy customer if I want a customer narrative.
Right.
I'll prove you wrong.
Right. It's going to be marginal at that point. Because at that point, the reason why you collect your own information is so you can say, hey, I know you've seen this, here's what we collected, here's how many more we talked to, here's how fresh it is, and I can give you this whole list you can talk to yourself. That's why you collect it. It's not necessarily to go into the market research firm for that particular rating at that time and say, hey, here's the problem I'm having. It is to make them think again down the road, though. These guys are on top of their game.
Yeah.
They're going to have information I need to make doubly sure, because none of these guys will want to walk in the room and seem like they're dummies.
So about 5 more minutes for questions. And seems like you've had some good discussion along the way as well.
Yeah, we interrupted for questions along the way.
Also introduce yourself so people can get a feeling for who you are.
This is Chandresh. Just a quick question. Is there a rating agency that rates agencies?
Who watches the watchers?
Yeah.
My company, since a couple of us came from class, we've been asked to do that over and over and over again. Could you rate the raters? We actually thought about doing that, sending out a big mass email, survey, whatever, and getting that information, and then publishing that for free, just putting it out there. Maybe there's some merit to it, maybe we should do it.
You know, the HisTalk blog did that on class. I don't know if anybody saw that. Or you could search the HisTalk blog to see it.
What were the results of
They
that?
interviewed CIOs and asked them a whole series of questions about class research.
Interesting.
And it came up very negative.
Oh,
I don't
really?
remember all the details, but it was very positive.
CIOs are the main audience that class serves.
Yeah.
They're their main audience.
Do you remember the question?
Yeah, they basically asked them what they're using class for, so they just
Yes.
kind of have them all weigh in.
How influential is it?
Right, so a lot of them said, there's different reasons they use it, that it's a tool in their kit while they're
Right.
shopping. There were multiple reasons, so
Right.
some negative,
Well-
some positive.
Well, here's a cardinal rule for, and this is for any industry, and this is for not just classes on any ratings firm or market research firm. Vendors use the data way more than who the supposed end customer is, the consumer. Vendors use the information way more because, just like you said, if I'm not buying something, why am I going to get this information? Why do I even care? But throughout the year, it's the vendors that, for the most part, use the information a whole lot more than anybody else. Because you got to stay abreast of this. Any other questions?
This is a follow-up. Do you know what the incidence is of positions or practices going out of class and doing exactly that, making decisions based on the data?
You know what? I don't know. I know it's fairly consistent. I had a group of providers that I would talk to on a regular basis, and they would call me up or email me and say, hey, we're looking at this. Could we get a report on this? Could we get this information? I don't know the number. I'm sorry. But I know it does happen.
I have a good friend who's a hospital CIO, and had a great conversation with him about this, and he's like, you know, all those reports are my first filter, right? You know, 'cause I'm so busy,
Yeah.
right?
That's exactly right.
And then after that, I throw it away.
It creates a short list.
Yes, it creates the short list.
That's exactly right. Similar experience after I got out of class. A lot of my provider friends would tell me the same thing. Say, you know what? I mean, it was cool talking to you. I love pinging you about specific questions. As far as the data and the reports, quick 5-minute short list. Is my vendor there? Great. Good to go. They moved on to their next level of diligence.
All right, one more question. I come in a class when I walk up here, is there anything better, right? I think that's what most hospital CIOs say. What else is better?
I'm Carl Berg, the EHR selector. You had one of your first slides, you had transparency, and you had the questioning the validity of the research and the methodology. I'm interested in market shares that EHRs have in various classes. So I look at what various market analyst companies do, and they often throw these out as freebies as a way of showing what their chops. And I wonder to what extent, A, you said it's about 80% it came up, it comes up with you, and to what extent do you put importance into that, into the question of just how it was done? For example, and I don't remember the class I'm not doing this, but are they hanging out questionnaires and anybody answers and they compile that, or are they sampling in a scientific way?
You're talking about, from my experience in class, how they would go
Yeah,
about
or
it?
in general, what you see is done in the industry. I'm not just trying to go after that.
No.
The sampling type.
Yeah, for the most part, when it came to the performance ratings, it's sampling, it's pure sampling. They go after a certain number, and I believe they have some FAQs on their site that tell you how they do that. When it came to market share, we did a couple of special reports per year, one of them EHR market share, and they would concentrate, I don't know if they've gone below this now, but it was hospitals above 200 beds, and that one was more of a census. There were a finite number of hospitals in the market that are above that bed size.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, and so that one was more of a census.
But I found a number of firms just will hang questions out and whoever answers.
We proactively reached out to all the hospitals above that bed size. So it was a census, so proactive reach out. It was near 100% coverage.
Thank you.
All right, let's give them a round of applause. Thanks.